Hey guys, welcome to Box Office Addict. This is Pat here. We are going to be doing something a little different this week. Instead of going over the box office weekend, which Mario continues to dominate and Evil Dead Rise obviously opened to 23 million, today we're going to break down Deadline's 22 most valuable blockbuster. 22 most valuable movie blockbuster. So if you don't know, Deadline Hollywood, which is the main website most people get a lot of their news information from when it comes to anything movie related or even the media in general. Nikki Fink created this years ago. I believe Nikki Fink is now dead and has passed on. And the site has continued on, and it's pretty much the cornerstone of knowing what the net profits are for movies. I guess you could go through Variety and other sources, but most people usually stick to Deadline. So every year they do a list of the 10 most profitable films for the studio. They finally finish because they release this as a weekly list as they do one movie at a time, like brackets. And so we finally have the top 10. So I'm going to go through the 10 movies that made the most net profit in 2022 and kind of break it down and talk a little bit why. So number 10, they have Smile, the horror film, which isn't a shocker. This film did not have a big budget and was a surprisingly big hit. So down here at the bottom, they break down the bottom line. So the PIX streaming and TV revenues of 80 million include the money Paramount pays itself to distribute the movie on Paramount Plus. So this is something that I found a trend on this year's articles, is that they are including profits that the studio pays itself for a movie that it made. I'm not exactly sure how that works. That seems insane to me. So they're saying because like Disney Plus pays $100 million for distribution itself for like a Black Panther movie, that counts as $100 million in profit. But I'm a little bit confused. You pay yourself that? So are they paying themselves that from profit that they made, or are they just paying themselves that to own everything with the movie? It's a little bit odd because it makes sense to me, right? You take ticket gross revenue from ticket sales and then DVD sales and merchandise sales. But how do you consider something a profit if you're paying yourself out of your own product? Now, maybe this is more advanced than I know. This is how accounting works to hide what true grosses are and so on. Maybe someone can give more insight on that in the comments, but it seems like a way to twist the numbers to make it seem like they made more money. The movie made 103 million in theaters. The movie also has a pay TV window on MGM, formerly Epix, which is where Paramount has its deal. Participation here, thanks to a theatrical debut, yielded 15 million to Finn, Temple Hill, and the Pix stars. The upside of going theatrical here instead of streaming, a 101 million net profit on all ancillaries. So yeah, Smile, which I think had a budget around 20 million, made over $200 million worldwide, and ended up making $100 million profit. So it's ranked 10. I wish they had this formatted better, where you could just jump to number 9 from this. But if you look right now on the website, it's like a total cluster. I have no idea. Deadline. Ooh, why is the font like that? What the fuck is going on? I'm already in like just disaster mode here. Okay, so number 9 is going to be Thor Love and Thunder. It says, despite not swinging as big as Hammer as Ragnarok, still profits as number 9 at Deadline's most valuable blockbuster. Now, this one I'm more questionable on the profits on this. Some of these numbers are a little questionable, and I certainly hold Disney to accountable for this. So we know that this movie cost somewhere in the range of $250 million is what was reported right there. Production costs is $250 million. And then it says $160 million in prints and ads. Video costs were 35, residuals 27, interest and overhead 45, participation 30. Total expenses $547 million. Total revenue 650. So here's how they break down the revenue. The box office brought in 760 million, and then that's our theatrical. They say 140 on home entertainment, and then they say 160 on television and streaming. Now, if you look here, it says here that the television and streaming, I don't know why the font's so small. that comes from the deal with Disney Plus. Right here, streaming figure, the money decide Disney paid itself to debut Thor on Disney Plus, despite higher production costs here compared to Ragnarok, 250 versus 180. Thunder still profits despite coming in lower than Thor Ragnarok's 174 million. So I think this number's not true then. So if they paid themselves part of the deal, I don't think this movie made $100 million in profit. I just don't see it. If you have this much in the budget and the marketing, and the movie only made $760 million, and ostensibly you spent like $350 million to make this movie, I don't think they made $100 million. I know a net profit's different than a direct profit, but still. Puss in Boot, this was a surprise success. This was a surprise ranker on here. I'm really proud of DreamWorks and everybody that worked on this movie and how good of a job they did. We don't need to deep dive into the article itself. They're pretty banal. It's just worth looking at the numbers here. So they had an entire expense of, they say the production was 110 million, prints and ads. So they're saying 319 in expenses. Total revenue is 440. And then that gives them a studio net profit of 120 million. This one's more believable, even though they probably have the streaming deal too, just because this movie, honestly, on Wikipedia it says the budget was 90 million, but the sources are saying that it's 110 million, and the movie made 480 million worldwide. So I don't know. I'm not surprised by this one. It's nice that this one got in at number 8, 120 million net profit. Once again, I don't know why the font is like this. I feel like the site's glitching right now. Okay, Batman ended up doing, I think 177 million is what they say at the end of the day. So Batman ended up being a profitable film. We didn't quite know the budget of this film. There was rumors that the original budget was 100 million, and then it shot up to 150 because of COVID at 185. They're saying here that it was 200 million. They're saying they spent 458 million in total, and of course the movie made 635 million in revenue, 770 million at the box office. So they're saying that it made a profit of $177 million. So we have a film that cost $200 million. It made $770 million. It seems possible that this made 177 million profit. I think of Guardians of the Galaxy when it came out and it cost, that first one, I believe that movie cost like 150 to 100, I think it was 170 million, and it made about 775 million, and it made over 200 million profit. So this seems to check out. This is a pretty big deal for Matt Reeves. To have a DC film be in the profits, obviously it isn't Joker money. Or other DC properties that have done well, but this is certainly better than what's been going on with Wonder Woman and Shazam and other movies that came out. It also just shows the longevity of Batman, that he can continuously produce be in a film that I think is going to do over 150 million in net profit. This will set up the sequel, and then obviously there's going to be the James Gunn stuff. But the hope, I would think, is that they would want the next film to do $1 billion. Or at least $950 million. I don't think the budget's going to jump that much higher from this film to the next film. At least that would surprise me. I wouldn't be shocked if the film cost 220 million maybe. But the hope that they're going to have is that the next film sort of doubles the gross. Not doubles, but adds like an extra $200 million. Because I'm not sure if this Robert Pattinson Batman can make $1 billion at the box office. We'll have to see, without COVID affecting it, if that's possible and how it does perform. But I'm not sure. Okay, so Jurassic World still comes in here. Number 6, Chris Pratt. So we have to talk about Chris Pratt for a second with this. So he's going to have this movie at number 6 for last year. Mario already looks like the hands-down winner for number 1 of this year currently. And then he has Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 coming out. So Chris Pratt is definitely the movie star right now, even if it doesn't feel that way. So this film got terrible reviews. It was the return of Colin Trevorrow. The first Jurassic World film made 1.6 billion worldwide. The second one did 1.3. So this franchise has been consistent financially. This does remind me of the Star Wars sequels, where the first film is huge, then the second film is like $600 million less, and then the third film just does a little bit over $1 billion, just kind of showing the decline from hype with film to film, and the reception, honestly, the audience reception. So this movie did not cost as much as a lot of these other films. They only spent $185 million on this movie. I don't think that's a bad budget considering this is the third film in a franchise and they brought back all these old characters and actors to perform them. So the net profit on this was $229 million on a gross of $1 billion. And I think a lot of that has to do with they didn't do too much in the cost. I'm going to assume there was a huge back end here though. Let's read about that. Our sources peg production costs at 185, which includes 6 to 8 million in extra COVID protocols by the studio. Universal's policies for movie that opened north to 50 million stateside in a 31-day theatrical window before they land on homes on premium VOD. Let's see who got the most out of this. The 160 million global streaming TV monies includes what the studio paid itself. So once again, the studio's paying itself through the first part of the Peacock window, following by a subsequent one on Amazon Prime Video. Sources factor $80 million in participations to cast, filmmaker, and producers. In particular, Steven Spielberg, an executive producer here, who has a really rich producing deal with Amblin. It's also important to note that in the wake of COVID and China banning several U.S. films to prioritize its own local fare, Dominion was one of the few Hollywood movies to break through in the market, earning $157.5 million. Net profit here is $229 million. So the thing about Steven Spielberg, he has a movie like The Fabelmans, just bomb horribly, or West Side Story. West Side Story lost money, and The Fabelmans lost money, but he still has his name on things like this from a movie he made. I mean, Jesus Christ, now we're talking Jurassic Park's 30 years old now. A 30-year-old movie, and he still gets these profits. So let's say this makes 80 million in participations. Spielberg, I'm assuming, got $30 million out of that. And he has other deals like that, like his deal with Universal. So every year, Spielberg's still making, you know, over $100 million probably himself. The question goes forward, though, the Jurassic World franchise, um, where's it going to go with these revenue drops? Is Chris Pratt going to stick around? Are they going to be able to keep up the billion-dollar grosses? I'm not necessarily sure. That's where a lot of it's at. I do feel like the franchise is definitely on the decline. I think they were surprised by how well the second film did. So this is interesting. Somehow this film has a higher net profit despite costing more and making less money. That's very interesting. Like Jurassic World made $1 billion. This film made $850 million, I think, 860. So this movie made $860 million. It cost $200 million. It cost more than Jurassic World. Maybe the participations weren't as high. Prints and ads were 140. So total expenses were 491. So actually less. And it ended up doing revenues in 750. So they say the studio net on this is 259. So this is a real interesting one because obviously Chadwick Boseman died. They didn't have him return as Black Panther. This film did not perform as well as Black Panther. That movie made 1.3 billion. This didn't even crack $900 million. I do think this was a financial disappointment in that sense. It ended up doing pretty good domestically, 454 million. But to not make $1 billion, and I know the thing is that they don't release the movies in China anymore, but should Marvel films have to rely on China to get those grosses? I mean, I think it says something more about Marvel. It's sort of like when people are like, oh, Endgame passed Avatar, some of these films. They didn't realize how big the Chinese box office was for Marvel there for a long time. It kind of inflated the idea of how huge they really were. So right here, the movie made 454 domestic, 859 global. It was 2 hours and 41 minutes. The sequel's worldwide haul was also missing Russia. They didn't get the Russian release, so 32 million was the previous film. So they probably lost about 30 million, 25 million there. Avatar really was affected about that. But right here, global streaming TV revenues of 170 includes Disney paying itself to put the movie on Disney Plus. Even though Wakanda's Forever global gross was 36% off from the original movie, the sequel still profits 259. So I don't know. I'm confused about this. Sometimes I read the comments and see what people say. Once again, there should be a smarter way to do this than counting the money Disney paid to itself as revenue. I don't doubt that this movie made money, but the final estimate and ranking is thrown off by that. Also worth noting that so far none of these movies were profitable from theatrical alone. Yes, some of the costs are also associated with streaming, but even without these costs, even some of the most profitable movies don't make their money back until VOD streaming physical sales kicks in. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. I agree with this. A lot of these movies that we've gone through so far did not make now Smile obviously did. But some of these blockbusters, I don't think they made a profit in theatrical. And I do think these articles are here to inflate the profit margins. They don't want to say that they didn't make a lot of money off the theatrical because that would be a disaster. Even though when we were covering the box office, or if you were following it through the last year or two, it was very obvious that was the case. Fifth most profitable movie of the year, and you want to pretend it's a failure. Hope you don't give financial advice. The profit is way down, and part of it, a significant part, is Disney paying itself to stream the movie. That's how they get profit, by shifting money from one company account to the other. Yeah, I agree with this, and I think the fact that Disney's continuing to have layoffs and things not go their way, I do think there is some I think there's some denial here that these movies did not make a lot of money for them, despite their costs. So we have Doctor Strange 2, directed by Sam Raimi. This film did end up doing pretty well worldwide, and obviously this is one where if it had gotten a China release or a Russia release, it would have made over $1 billion. The only reason this didn't make over $1 billion was because of that. And I give this one a little bit more leeway because this one did get up to $955 million worldwide. So it really, it got pretty damn close despite that. So I do give this film a lot of credit. They were definitely hoping this was going to do, you know, 1.3, 1.4 billion. I think coming off Spider-Man No Way Home, the reviews just weren't there. The hype just wasn't there after a little while. I think the hoping people had seen WandaVision kind of blew them, screwed them a little bit. So they're saying this had a 284 million net profit. Once again, $200 million budget because that just seems to be the flat budget now. It was one of the only five movies to exceed 900 million in global ticket sales among all MCU worldwide openings. Doctor Strange 2 ranked fourth, and was also the second best of COVID era after Spider-Man No Way Home, 600.5 million worldwide start. The pick misses the standard Marvel 1 billion mark at the box office, sans a China release, given the country's continued boycott of many Hollywood pictures last summer. The sequel arrived on Disney Plus 48 days after its theatrical release, one of the shorter windows for an MCU title since Black Widow day and date controversy, though still generous to exhibition. By this point in time, Doctor Strange 2 had made 99% of its 411.3 million domestic take. Despite the lackluster fan reception, Doctor Strange 2 money-wise didn't really get warped in the end. Disney pays themselves $180 million for the streaming licenses, shifting money from one account. So that's somebody pointing that out again. I agree. The ignorance of the comments is astounding. Yeah, even worldwide, there's no way 160 million are the numbers. The number shows domestic video sales at just over 15 million. That's what I'm saying. They're claiming these numbers, but if you can go look up the numbers for how much they sold in home video, this movie isn't selling. This isn't like 2010 when a movie could make like $50 million in home video sales on the norm, or do more than that. I think Frozen made like $200 million in home video sales. Love the way Disney adds an extra 180 million streaming revenue from Disney Plus in order to push everything into profit. Take off the streaming revenue, add only likely costs of rep shots and overrun reshoots. He meant to write. I was like, what is rep pots? He meant reshoots and overruns, and the numbers on most of the top 10 look a lot less sustainable. Profits. I'd love to see the accounting entries for the streaming revenue. Yeah, I agree. So I hate to sound like beating a dead horse here, but so far this has been all I can take from this is it just seems like Disney inflated its numbers on all the Marvel stuff to make it seem more profitable. Now here we are with Illumination, Minions, The Rise of Gru. It's no shock that this film is at number 3. Obviously, this film did very well. They don't ever spend more than $80 million on these movies, I don't think. So they spent $100 million on this one, is what they say. And the movie made $939 million at the worldwide box office. So they're saying 382 million. I can believe this. I can totally believe that Illumination made $300 million on this movie. I think, what is it? Despicable Me 3 made 366 million. And I don't know if that's the highest net profit they've made. It's definitely up there. So, yeah, it actually did better than Despicable Me 3 when it comes to profits. That's really impressive. And you got to think that Steve Carell probably got a lot of money. Um, he probably gets paid the most because I doubt they pay people who voice the minions. So, yeah. And already looks like Mario this year is definitely going to have the highest net profit. It says the budget's 100 million. So maybe we've fallen back from the standard 75, 80 million from Illumination to 100 million. So here we are with smaller movies, big profits. On Oscar winner and horror hits among overachievers and Deadline's 2022 most valuable blockbuster. I cannot talk today. Okay, so Megan, they said the profit's 78 million. I can believe that. Blumhouse continues to be a juggernaut in the industry. Where the Crawdads saying, they're saying the net profit's $74 million. That was a small film. The Black Phone from Scott Derrickson, 67.8 million net profit. That's pretty good. Scream did 56 million. That's believable. The budget was only around, I think it was only like 25 million. I don't think they spent much on this movie. Following up that, Everything Everywhere All at Once did 32 million. They didn't get too much money from this, considering it made like 130 million worldwide, I think. Yeah, 138 on a fairly low budget. Yeah, 25 million. So you think they would have made a little bit more. But still, yeah. I like when the small movies like that can make money. Oh, the biggest box office bombs of 2022. That's interesting. That might be worth talking about in a different video, actually. We might save that for a different video because I would like to talk about the failure of Amsterdam and Lightyear and all those movies. So we won't focus on that right now. We'll just skip ahead to Top Gun. I think a lot of people thought Top Gun was going to be #1 this year, and I don't blame people because Avatar 2 cost so much more. Avatar 2's budget was much higher than Top Gun Maverick's budget. Top Gun Maverick's budget was like 170 million and it made 1.5 billion, and Avatar's budget was apparently over 400 million and it made 2.3 billion. So I think a lot of people on Reddit, on the box office forum, thought Top Gun was going to come in #1. And some people still think that Top Gun made more money and that the Avatar numbers are BS because of Disney, but I don't know, man. I think people just are hung up on the fact that James Cameron made the highest grossing and most profitable movie of the year again, and I think it just bothers some people. So here's the crazy part about this. Tom Cruise got a shitload of money for this. So if you see here, they spent 177 million on the movie on this budget, a lot on advertising. The movie made 1.1 in revenue for them out of 1. Well, it was 1.5 worldwide box office. So the studio made 391 million net profit. So if you look at the participations on this, it's nuts. 280 million in participations includes for Kaczynski, McQuarrie, Bruckheimer, and certainly Cruise. Cruise landed what sources call an old-fashioned movie star deal, one of the best in history. While some will tell us it's north of 100 million, others tell us it's double that and his best payday on Mission Impossible. That it's his best payday on Mission Impossible, which would get him to 200 million. So they're saying here from some sources that Tom Cruise made $200 million off of this movie, and that would not shock me. And then you think with Mission Impossible coming out, he's on track to be a billionaire. I think right now his net worth is about 600 million. This would put him up to about 800. Obviously, he's going to be paying taxes. But still, a movie that made this much money, I mean, 391 million is nothing to scoff at. That's a huge net profit. But this should have made more. This should have made like $500 million in net profit. But they paid so much money to Tom Cruise. And I'm sure Jerry Bruckheimer got a pretty decent amount. Treat me like an accounting dummy. Here's a question. If Paramount splits the net with two of other entities and what is left over, math done in my head, is roughly 130 million. Does that mean that its actually company earned back at least 220 million in its coffers, which the extra 90 million being for its share of the budget? Roughly speaking, on the 90 million, I suppose too would be to add back all other costs as well. A minus B equals C. A is the amount made, B is the amount spent, C is the profit. So if the amount spent is 90 million and the profit is 40 million, we can now see that A minus 90 equals 40. Using simple algebra, A must be 130. They invested 90, their equity made them 130, therefore they made a profit of 40 million. Not a bad investment, if you ask me. So who financed the rest of Paramount Finance 50%? Paramount financed 88.5 million with other companies loaning 44.2 million. Yeah, I think Tom Cruise wasn't like Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation. He basically got paid for by a Chinese like businessman. He went to China to get the movie made because they wouldn't produce another MI movie. It's very interesting. Participation's 280. This is the reason why Top Gun made a crap load of money. If you look at the other films, the numbers are nowhere near as close. Jurassic World Dominion only had a figure about 80 million. Avatars will be way lower, offsetting the higher production cost. No way 2.3 million is more than 1.4 billion. Lunacy to suggest otherwise. It would have been, if it had not been for Tom Cruise, 500 million give or take to appear in the film. He made 200 million at the most. See, this is the thing. There's been debates that Top Gun actually made more money, and it's because of Tom Cruise. But if you go look at the number one with James Cameron, according to Deadline, that is not true because they paid out $300 million in participation, and the film still made a profit of 531 million despite that. I mean, this was the obvious number one, but I did think Top Gun had a chance. But you really have to understand, this movie did make $1 billion more than Top Gun. Not quite, but $900 million more at the box office worldwide. It didn't beat it domestically, but this movie made so much money in other countries. It's sort of hard to deny that. So according to their sources, because the rumors have been all over the place, the infamous James Cameron saying that it had to be one of the 4 highest grossing movies of all time, so everybody thought the budget was $1 billion. But they weren't factoring the cost of the sequels, and then he had to clarify that many times. So they're saying it was a $400 million movie, which I think puts it on par with the first Avatar, because that one's been discussed. They always claimed it cost 237. I've heard 350. I've heard Avatar 1 cost 375. Nobody really knows. Prints and ads were 175. Video costs were 100. Residuals were 40. Interest and overhead was 72. Participations were 300. Insane. So we have the box office here was 2.3 billion, and they're saying the revenue was 1.6. So the participations they're saying here was paid out between James Cameron and the other actors. They're saying they paid a lot of the actors up front. Where does it say that at right here? Come on, let me find that. This font is oddly small. There are about wild rumors out there that the production cost for Avatar 2 was some suggesting 700 million. However, backing out the amount of money it cost to shoot concurrently future sequels during Avatar The Way of the Water production schedule, our sources believe the net production cost is 400 million solely for Way of the Water, including the New Zealand tax credits. TSG co-financer Avatar The Way of the Water at 25%, with spending caps. According to those in the know, note, during the production of The Way of the Water, Cameron had to shoot younger cast members who were aging out. For example, Trinity Jolie Bliss, who played Tuck, who was 7 when cast and is now 13, and Jack Champion, who was 12 when cast as Spider but is now 18, because Champion was growing like a weed. Per Cameron, the second, third, and first act of the 4th movie had to be done in one production. So that was one reason the cost went up so high, is because they had to shoot a lot of footage for the sequels because of the young stars. That doesn't mean they filmed like all of Avatar 2 and 3 or anything for 4. I think they did shoot some stuff for 4 though. No filmmaker in the history of Hollywood has had 3 movies among the top 20 highest grossing movies of all time, let alone the top 10. Not even Spielberg as a director. You'd have to go to Jurassic Park at number 32 with 1.1 billion. Cameron now has 3 of the top 4. Well, that's not true. I would have to assume back in the 80s, Spielberg had 3 movies in the top 20. There's no way that Jaws, E.T., and Jurassic Park weren't in the top 20 highest grossing films of all time in 1993. So you're doing this unadjusted or not going back. If you go back to the 90s, Spielberg definitely had, I would say, more than 3 movies in the top 20. Um, yeah, there's no way that's impossible that he's the first director in the modern world, sure. But Spielberg back in the day, E.T. made 700. E.T. was the highest grossing film of all time until Jurassic Park, so you know he has two. And Jaws made like 400 million in the 70s. And sure, the Star Wars movies were ahead of Jaws, I think. And a few other movies like Batman was up there at the time. But yeah, this is actually that's false information. Spielberg has had 3 films in the top. George Lucas, I guess if he had directed those movies, if he had directed all the Star Wars films, but as a producer, he would have had some in as well. So it's saying here that the participations in 300 million, Cameron and producer John Landau is to believe to be 20% of the first dollar, with escalations that get him to 50%. The actors we hear received crazy upfront in lieu of back ends. Cameron received a reported 350 million for the first Avatar, but that's when home video entertainment was much higher. Only 150 million worldwide revenue are expected here for 2, despite high premium VOD rates. So yeah, so they're saying 531 million. This did piss a lot of people off. I remember on Reddit and in the comments, this was just people were so mad that Avatar 2 was, and then there was people like people said no cultural impact. Let's see here. So it eked out number 1, sure, eked out by 140, lower rate of return than Top Gun by a measly 3%. I'd be willing to trade that by the 36% greater net at these heights. Although 530 million in profit is nothing to sneeze at, the first Avatar did over 1.2 billion in profit. Yeah, but the first Avatar, see, the thing, they claim it cost 237, but I've always heard that it cost more than that, and it made about 2.8 billion, and this movie made 2.3. I still don't know anyone who has seen the highest grossing movie in cinematic history. Nobody even talks about it. And I like somebody says, you're literally talking about it. So that's really funny. So yes, James Cameron continues to be the king. I made a video on this. James Cameron does it again a while ago. There's no reason to talk about Avatar 2 again. The story of 2022 is that Disney definitely had a decline, even though they had a lot of films in the top 10. The Marvel films definitely made less money than normal. They were very fortunate that Avatar was associated with them via the Fox deal, although James Cameron does own the IP and can do whatever he wants with it, and he clearly got paid quite a bit. And the stories are is that he only talked to Bob Iger. He did not have any supervision on this film. Nobody was allowed to call and ask any questions or basically produce or interact with James Cameron except Bob Iger was one of the only people that he had direct communication with because he's James Cameron. The other story here is that Warner Brothers had a pretty abysmal year. I think the only thing on there was the Batman. Low budget horror and genre stuff continues to do well. Scream, Smile made a profit. Megan made a profit. Illumination continues to dominate in the animation field. They have certainly taken that mantle from Disney. It's not even close at this point, at least when it comes to terms of profitability. It's pretty sad for Disney considering their cornerstone for a long time has been animation. Although you could say Avatar 2 is an animated movie, and I would be fine with that because it kind of is. And yeah, and then Tom Cruise now with Top Gun and the Mission Impossible franchise is just riding high, and now we're coming into Mission Impossible 7. But 2022 was a weird year for the box office. 2023 has started off to a much better start, and I've liked the variety of movies a lot more than what we got in 2022. But I think the big story of the year, and it was debatable going in, is obviously Avatar. Ended up being the film it needed to be, and now we're all curious about how Avatar 3 is going to perform. Real quick, we'll go check the box office real quick. We'll just do it real fast since I didn't give you the regular show here. Come on, load. If you see here, Mario only dropped 35% again. That is insane. This is after a few days. It's at 875 million worldwide. That's insane. Evil Dead Rise was adjusted up to 24.5 million. It's at 42 million worldwide. Which, if you actually go look, the Evil Dead remake from 2013 did 25 million. So people are talking about this like, wow, it did 24 million, but I saw the Evil Dead remake in theaters when it came out. It made 25 million in 2013. So I don't actually think this number is that impressive. They did better numbers 10 years ago. So I mean, it's decent, and I'm sure the budget wasn't high, but The Covenant by Guy Ritchie opened to an abysmal 6.3. John Wick 4, once again, they're not updating the international box office. It's officially the highest grossing film of the franchise at 358 worldwide, but I don't know why it takes them 2 weeks to update the international on it. Dungeons and Dragons continues to fall off. Air is not doing great. Renfield is a disaster. Beau is Afraid made 2.8 million at 965 theaters. I see that dropping off considerably. The Spirited Away live on stage, I think that's the stage play filmed and they're releasing that in theaters. I'm not sure. And then Scream 6 is on pace to, unadjusted, become the highest grossing film of the franchise worldwide. And Creed 3 is at 271 million, and I think doesn't have much left in the tank, honestly. It looks like it's pretty done. I mean, it dropped 70% in 1,100 theaters. So I don't know. I thought Creed was going to do a little bit better and hold on a little bit better. And Air is at 68 million, so it's still nowhere near making a profit considering how much Amazon spent on it. And Dungeons and Dragons is at $178 million, which is great, but the movie cost $150 million. Excuse me. So right now it's just, this was almost like I didn't want to do the show this week, is that Super Mario is just dominating the box office. But if we go back real quick and we look at the Evil Dead remake slash sequel, I guess, from 2013 right here, if you look, the movie's budget was 17 million. It opened to 25 million 10 years ago. Made 97 million worldwide, 54 mil domestic. I don't know if the new Evil Dead movie will be on par with this or not. It depends. This movie did not hold very well. I remember not even hating that movie at the time. I remember liking some scenes in it. So, yeah, 10 years later, and you pretty much have the same opening weekend for this franchise. I don't know if this is going to end up with the 97 million. It could end up doing over 100 million. I am a fan of the Evil Dead movies, obviously, so I'm happy that this movie did well, and it's getting pretty good reviews. So hopefully this holds better than the one did in 2013, and it can make a little bit more money. Because I actually want Warner Brothers to do well, and I want horror franchises like this, legacy sequels like this, to do better than the regurgitated stuff we've been getting from other studios. Anyway, thank you for sitting with me during this laborious episode of Box Office Addict. I'm sorry that there wasn't an episode on Sunday. It's because I kind of didn't have time to do this video and I was working around that. But I appreciate everybody sitting through this with me. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Please hit the notification bell. All that bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Leave a comment. All that stuff. But mostly, if you do leave a comment, I'd like for you to kind of tell me, how do you feel about the profitability of some of these movies and where profits are going to go in the future with studios? Because I think we're going to see a lot more of this paying yourself for your streaming service thing, especially with the ad thing that's now been added into Netflix and other streaming services, that really the only comparable thing you had was YouTube and Hulu when it came to advertising. And how streaming service really aren't making the profits that some of these studios thought they were going to make. So the big question is, where is the money going to be coming in this current recession we're entering into with some of these Hollywood movies? If not directly from the theatrical, and the home video market is on, I don't want to say it's dead, but it's on a pretty big decline, let's say that. And then now that we know that streaming services don't make the money they do, I'm not exactly sure how studios are going to make enough money to keep producing things at the level that they want to. And that's the curiosity of going into 2024, 2025. Is there going to be just 1/3 of the movies released that we're typically used to? And is there going to be a major decline in what's released on streaming services, including television and movies? And Netflix has even said that they're going to produce less movies. They're not going to spend less money, but they're not going to make all these small indie films because they're finding out they don't make any money off them. They basically just do them for prestige. So I'm curious what's going to happen here. It's an odd time, but Mario making money, I think, is a sign of the future of where we're going, which is going to be they're going to adapt every big IP that hasn't been adapted yet and try to milk everything out of it as soon as they can so they can still make some money to justify this. But it's just not enough money to keep the theaters open, and it's not enough money to keep producing a lot of stuff. So this has to end up somewhere negative, unless something happens that changes the dynamic of how profits are made in this entertainment industry. But I'm not sure yet. But if you are a box office addict like myself, keep your addiction. Please join me next week as we look at. I don't even know what the hell's opening. I still think Mario's going to keep controlling the box office for a while, uh, at least until we get more into summer. And it'll probably pass $1 billion coming up on this next weekend. So cool.